Hi, friend.
Hi, friend.
And to the brave hearts listening out there, welcome to Permission to be Human. I'm Andrea.
And I'm Janelle.
Get ready for some real-time relationship woo and wisdom
from the front lines with occasional tantrums and tears
about how breaking rules, blurring boundaries, and tossing tradition can be catalysts for finding your truth.
Let's debunk the fairy tales we were told as children and create a new map for life.
Yes, Disney can go fuck itself.
If you're seeking permission to choose your own path,
freedom is the new F word, people,
and want to feel less alone along the way,
we got you. Please note, this is our side of the story. Our partners and metamors have their own individual experiences, and we do not speak for them.
Hi, friend. Happy summer and sunshine today.
Right. Yeah. Denver is really just starting its summer because we had a month of Seattle weather.
We did.
And I was thinking that as I just ran to the bathroom before I got on this podcast, because I do that every time. And I look out your window, and out your window are these two images, right? There's two windows. There's this beautiful purple, blue, pink stained glass window.
Oh, the house next door. Yeah, it's like 4 feet away. Mm-hmm.
Right. We live very urban. And then the other window has cobwebs and chicken wire and like maybe it's broken. I can't really tell. There's these two beautiful, it's like abandonment and beauty, like all in one. And I love looking to see if anything changes. Nothing ever changes though. They look exactly the same.
Yes.
So who lives there?
Yeah, that's Jules and Zeb. They have lived there for 40 years. That window that looks broken probably is broken. It probably hasn't been opened maybe in 40 years. I don't know. We've only been here 2. But it's a beautiful contrast.
Yeah.
These are old architectural homes from the 1920s.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, awesome. So let's talk about our headwear because we always like talking about our headwear. It's like our flair. So tell me about your piece that you're wearing.
I consider this art. It's usually hanging up. It's been hanging up on my wall, or I have it in my closet on this mannequin. And so it's very rare that I wear it, but that's what we get to do now on a podcast, is wear whatever we want. And this I got in Tanzania when I was doing safari in the Serengeti, and I visited with the Maasai tribe.
Cool. I love it. Yeah. You can tell it's handmade.
Yes.
I mean, it's clearly a piece of art.
I love it.
Nice. And I'm wearing my cowgirl hat, which is part of my brand that I used to wear all the time. And it eventually broke down. And broke down. But I didn't notice that. And I had to rebrand. You helped me rebrand by finding a new hat in Costa Rica, a different kind of hat. And my daughter, in the spirit of our podcast about motherhood today, my daughter said, she's like, Mom, you need to get a new hat. She's like, it's so bad. You don't even realize how bad it is. You don't even see it anymore. And so I was like, okay. So I went out and got it. And I did get a new one, right? So it does lose its shape over time, but here I am.
There, yeah, we can count on our daughters to say the truth.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. She is good at telling me the truth. She's very real.
Well, I'm excited for this episode. The big theme of today is about staying yourself amidst motherhood.
Right.
And this is an area that you are the specialist in, as I do not have this experience at all. And you are such a role model for me. And I love witnessing you in your mothering and your womaning. And so I'm excited to let the rest of the world know how you do it.
Cool. Well, I want to dedicate this episode to my mom. She was a truly amazing mom. I'm so grateful for her. And I wanted to say that she told me this growing up. And I feel the exact same way now. Being a mom is my greatest role. I am many things. But being a mom is the most important thing. And nothing could replace that. I can really say that with a lot of honor and spirit. So thank you, Mom. And I'll talk a little bit about my experiences with motherhood today.
Great. So why did you want to do this episode?
Well, I came from small town Midwest, and I remember learning about feminism as I got older and in college and in my 20s. And a lot of what I read felt like told me that I couldn't have a career and have children too, right? So I couldn't have children and be a good feminist. And I felt like I had to choose. And I didn't like that idea. I didn't want to have to choose. And so I read Kate Chopin's Awakening in college, and the idea behind this story was that she said, I would die for my children, but I would not give up my life for my children.
That's really potent.
Really, I love that sentiment. And this felt like a great way to bridge my desire for motherhood with my understanding of feminism. Now, my understanding of feminism has evolved over the years, but at the time, that really united these concepts. And it felt like I could do both. I was like, great, I can do that. I wasn't a mom yet, but I liked that idea. I wanted to follow it.
It sounds like you were able to reconcile the idea of how you could be a mom, but not let it consume you.
Yes, exactly. I love that idea. I remember running this by my mom one day as we drove across the Mississippi River on I-80, probably during college when she was driving me home. And she agreed. And, she thought, I think she was a good model for this idea as well. And that felt really good. At that time, I was still, looking to her for advice and insight a lot of the time.
And why do you think that felt good?
I think now, especially, I know that being a mom is just one part of me. It's the most important part, but it's still just one part. And I have many parts.
So what did you do to make sure that you stayed Andrea?
Yeah, good question. I guess I kept taking care of myself. I put my oxygen mask on first. I remember hearing that as a child and thinking, no, I think my mom would put my oxygen mask on first. I totally didn't get it. And I exercised, I got my hair done. I tried to remain relevant. As my daughter told me recently, she's like, Mom, you're not necessarily stylish, but you do have a style. And she meant it with such genuine, spirit. And, I listened to music. I joined a choir. I was not that long ago. I did 100-day challenges. I played around on the piano. I built a little free library. I also kept working, and I kept reinventing my business and following my passion. And it's a balance, of course. And I want to remind anyone out there listening, all the Bravehearts, if you don't want to work and you don't have to, great. Like, you don't have to work to find yourself. I think there's a lot of other places to find your identity. And that seemed really essential to staying myself.
Do you think that was conscious on your part?
I think it was. And I think it was both. I think I did it as a matter of inspiration, and I was drawn to doing different things than motherhood. But it was also necessity because I needed space from my family sometimes, and I got overwhelmed and would get frustrated. And I also kept doing my weird things, right? Like, sometimes that can be enough. I remember putting Outfield's Your Love as my ringtone.
Is that the one you still have?
Yeah, it is. I've had it for like 7.5 years.
Yeah.
Before that, I had Journey's Don't Stop Believin'. And it just makes me happy. Like, it's just a little blast from the past that makes me dance. My husband and I dressed up on Halloween. I wear cowgirl hats sometimes. I remember the time when I started wearing cowboy boots to yoga class and just thinking, this doesn't really work, does it? Except, I can. It doesn't matter. Like, I can just be myself. I still take road trips, and I still talk to strangers and had impromptu dance parties. And I started playing music with the windows down. And I guess as I say that, I realized that I didn't do all those things before I had my child. But I guess you could say I kept growing. Like, as I had her, I kept changing and I kept growing. And maybe she had a hand in bringing some of that out in me. But I didn't stop it from coming.
One of my favorite stories about you is about the talent shows.
Right.
When you're speaking to what your daughter brought out of you. Like, this to me is like the epitome of that.
Right. And this was so funny because when I told you were like, wait, did you used to do this? I'm like, no, I never did this before. So the story is that my daughter's school had a talent show every year. And one of the moms talked about this thriller dance that she used to do. And I said, why don't we do that for the talent show?
Were parents involved in the talent show? Is that like a standard thing?
Well, I don't know, because my daughter was just getting old enough to go to the talent show. So I didn't really know the history. But at her school, it was open. They said, sure, you can join the talent show. Like there's very few rules at Waldorf. so they're like, great, you can join the talent show. So we gathered up a bunch of moms together with my friend Carla. We made up a dance to Thriller based on some stuff we found on YouTube. Mm-hmm. We called moms and said, do you like dancing to 80s music? Why don't you join our troupe? Eventually we had 10 to 12 moms, and we had 15 to 20 third graders that also wanted to do it. Of course, the kids are great. They don't care if they're good or not. They're just like, great, teach me to dance, right? They're not worried about perfection. So that first year, we all dressed up as zombies and performed Thriller. And it was so much fun. My husband did it with me and a few guys as well. And we just loved it. It was so easy. It was so like easy to get up there and just perform and have fun with it and know we weren't being graded. We didn't have to be the best.
Mm-hmm. And I would guess when you're using the word easy there, this is like, for you, this was easy. Because for me, I'm not sure that's the word that would have come to mind. But that easy, and I'm also like, was it enlivening? Was it exhilarating? It feels like it would have brought some of those elements out of you as well.
Right. It made me feel so alive. I was like, great, I'm performing. Like, yay, I'm dressed up.
At a third grade talent show, dressed up as a zombie. This is such a highlight.
So then that became a trend. The next year, Carla and I made up a dance to Vogue, and that was so much fun. We did it all again. Mm-hmm. My daughter was still interested. We all got dressed up in black and white with sparkles and Madonna wear. And then the third year, we made up a dance to Footloose. And then we didn't get to do it because of the pandemic. But Carla and I continued to get together and make dances up to random 80s songs, even though weren't performing them because we had so much fun doing it. So this was a way that I stayed myself amidst motherhood, even amidst a school.
Right. Oh my gosh. I still so love these stories.
It was super fun.
Are there any big decisions you made that merged the pre-kid Andrea with the parent Andrea?
Yeah, I guess so. I think my husband and I had just gotten home from the Peace Corps and couch surfing and hitchhiking in the Middle East and North Africa for 9 months when we thought, okay, like now's the time to have a child. And so I was already on this wild streak thinking, what's risk? Like, we're fine. We can go hang out in these random countries, hitchhike, couch surf. So I saw the business of being born, and that taught me I didn't need to have a baby in a hospital. So I had it in a birthing center. And then ended up sending my child to a very non-traditional school and thought, yeah, I'm going to follow my own trail here. And this seems really different. I really liked their philosophy. I liked their pagan spirit.
Seriously? And I remember you saying that it was a non-traditional school, which is its own thing. But then from the grandparents, I would say, the grandparent perspective, it was also very, very different and outside of the norm.
Yeah. And when I had my baby in a birthing center instead of a hospital, my mom and my mother-in-law were terrified. I mean, they were like, what are you doing? Mm-hmm. And then when we sent our daughter to a Waldorf school where they don't teach you to read until third grade and they don't have any textbooks and there's no computers or laptops or iPads, they were also alarmed. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, no. My husband and I were like, this is clearly what we're supposed to do. We love this philosophy. We love this spirit. We love the teachers. We love the different way of doing it. They meet children where they are. So this was also a little rogue. Mm-hmm. And this was the way I guess I kept being myself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I know you've done a bunch of crafty, artsy things with your daughter. Have you always been this way?
No, not at all. I've always had this creative streak, but I have such an aversion to a mess that I was always like, she would say, oh, can we paint? And I would just be like, oh, that sounds terrible. I so don't want to do painting. Like, that's going to make a mess. It's going to get paint on the floor. And this is a little bit from my own growing up. I think my mom has also had a pretty big aversion to messes. So I was definitely not a big crafter. I'd never been to Joann Fabrics, that's for sure, before my child went to Waldorf school. I had never owned a glue gun, for sure. And I only went to Michael's for frames. So that was a difference for me. Oh, something else about the mess is that my daughter knew that I hated messes and she learned it over time. I remember her once creating this massive mess in her room with all of her books. She took all of her books off the shelf and just spread them all around her room. And I completely freaked out. I was like, what are you doing to your books? But then later on, maybe when she was 7 or 8, she said to me one day, she's like, Mom, you just see the mess and you panic. And, so she was noticing that. And I started noticing that about myself. So I started embracing the mess.
But so like what, something in you was like, oh, maybe after your daughter was like, Mom, you're just panicking over a mess. So that you're like, oh, maybe a mess isn't something to panic over.
So 2 things happened. I think that she told me about the panic. And then when I started sending her to Waldorf school, we visited this school. And when we took a tour, we went through this big hallway. It was an old school, maybe built in the early 1900s. And the hallways were a mess, like a disaster. I mean, there was dust, there was random pencils and backpacks and shoes strewn across, and just things were not put away. It wasn't that neat. And I remember after she had been there, say 6 months, I was on the marketing committee, and I mentioned to the principal, I said, it's kind of messy. Like, don't you think that we should clean things up a little bit for when the parents come for a tour? That just seems like a good idea. And I'll never forget her looking at me, and there was no shame or judgment in her voice, just truth. And she said, Andrea, she said, childhood is messy. Childhood is like the inside of an egg. It will always be messy, and we have to be comfortable in the mess. Pretty resonant for our life, wouldn't you say? So that helped me release some of the it slowly sunk in. At first I was like, no, you're wrong. Like, school should be neat, and so should a house.
Just because you're a principal of a school and clearly you know child development way better than me. No, I have a child.
Yeah. I know. But I didn't say that to her, but I just took that in. Mm-hmm. It was a big moment. I'll never forget it. She's not with the school anymore, but she was magical. So in this way, I've been learning from my daughter and from her school all along. So, and now I realize that having a child taught me that stuff didn't have to be perfect, that I could release my attachment to the outcome and just enjoy the process of creation. And that was really big. So a bunch of projects started merging. I started painting rocks with messages and cool lettering and mushrooms and flowers. I started making flowers out of old book pages. And I didn't want to sell them or anything. It wasn't about that. It was about letting my creative process flow. And, so I would just give them away as gifts. But I just got so into it. So we turned one of our living room walls into an ongoing mural painting project. We didn't put any rules around it. We had a tarp and we had paint and markers, and we created this big mural, and then she would add little bits to it. It was crazy.
How long did you have that mural wall?
At least a year, like a long time. And then I let her paint flowers in her room on one of her walls. I bought 100 turquoise insulators. Do you know what those are? Like, does this ring a bell for you?
Oh, I know them because I've seen them in your house, but I have no idea what that means, even though I've seen them. I know what they look like.
Right. So they're glass, and the brand is Hemingway, I think. And they are what used to sit atop a telephone pole. So they're an insulator to the power. And I don't know why they're turquoise, but they are. And so I started getting obsessed with those, and I found them on Craigslist for $2 a piece and bought like 150 of them and put them all up around my house.
Yeah. They're antiques, but they're the little turquoise, bulbous.
Yeah.
About the size of my hand. Things all around your house.
Different sizes.
And they are, what I'm hearing is they are protectors for power. Is that right?
Yes. And I've never put the metaphor together until just now. Yes, they are. They insulate the power. They're not used anymore.
Mm-hmm. Clearly. When have you last seen an antique turquoise glass top on top of a power pole?
Right.
Wow.
So they're insulators of power. They protect the power.
Or protect others from power.
I don't know.
We might have to do a little research on these.
Right. So I also started Modpodging old book pages all over the other side of my living room wall. So that took 4 years. It was a huge project. And no books were ruined in the making of this Modpodge wall.
How is that possible?
So we only used books that were already falling apart. because I get most of my books from Little Free Libraries and from ARC. So we would read a book and then, it would start losing its spine, and then we would start ripping pages out of it. And we did it one by one, right? Like I chose the page, I ripped it out, we Modpodged it to the wall.
Oh, like every page on that wall is selected intentionally?
Oh, yeah. I mean, okay, so the last half, there's fillers, but like there definitely wasn't a wallpaper. I mean, for the first half, I would pull out pages where we love the passage, pages with an illustration, table of contents, maybe a page in the beginning of the book with a dedication. And then I used a poetry book from my college years where it was all the poems I loved. So we chose books like Alice in Wonderland and Shakespeare's comedies, Island of the Blue Dolphins, Little House on the Prairie, Little Women, all of my favorite books that I read to her.
I have seen this wall so many times, and I do not know the history of the wall, and I love hearing about it right now.
So fun. I love doing it. And it took us a while, but
4 years.
I mean, yeah, we just took our time, because it was a slow going thing.
Yeah.
And Modpodge is an old thing. Do you know? I mean, it's been called Modpodge since the 50s. Like my mom used Modpodge to make crafts when she was like dating my dad. She made him this plaque with a Modpodge.
I think of it, or I was thinking paper mache, but I don't think that's right.
No, it's like a glue that you wipe on, and it looks white when you wipe it on, and then when it dries, it's clear.
Got it. Okay.
So anyway, I started playing piano again. I did 100 days of haiku. You get the idea. I kept my creativity, and she inspired a lot of my creativity.
Beautiful. And what about as she got older? How did you hold on to yourself?
Yeah, because she lost interest in some of that stuff. We moved to Costa Rica for a year. That was an inspiration from myself and my husband, because pre-child, we had done a lot of traveling. And we knew the power of traveling. We knew the power of seeing another culture and living and adapting in a different country. And we wanted to make sure that my daughter experienced that at a young age. So I would say that was also like a coming back to ourselves. And I worried in the beginning we wouldn't be able to do that, because for me, when a baby was young, I would see these people like, let's go to Colombia and like bring our 2-year-old with us. And I thought, no, I'm not doing that. Wait, just sounds too challenging. And so as she got older, though, I thought, okay, when she's 10, 11, 12, we could do that. And we did. And it was an amazing experience.
Yes, and I got to go be part of that experience and visit you down there.
You were there too.
Okay, and so what do you think happens if you don't stay yourself? Like, what's the cost of giving all your energy to your kids and or losing yourself? Or was there ever a moment where you felt that did happen to you?
Yeah. I'd say you go through phases where I got pretty attached to going into the school, spending time at the school, volunteering, wanting to be with her. But I think there was a nice blend of going through phases of that and then finding my way out of those phases. So I don't think there was ever a risk of losing myself, but maybe myself would get a little quieter for a while while I'd throw myself into her. And I think it is a delicate balance and something you have to stay conscious of.
What I'm reminded of is the story that you shared when your daughter was very, very young, and you and your husband had this moment where you passed in the hallway.
Right. So,
and it feels like in that moment, there was like a recognition of maybe you were going to lose yourself if you continued on the path that you were on in that moment.
Yeah, good memory. Because at that time, my daughter was probably 6 months old. I was feeling a little depressed. I was shuffling around in my bathrobe.
Were you working?
I wasn't working yet. Didn't feel like I could manage both the work and her at the same time at home. And my husband was working, and we were pretty stressed. The furnace broke. He got laid off, and we were like, ugh, this is hard. Like, what are we going to do? She wasn't sleeping. And we passed each other in the hallway that one day, both looking pretty haggard. And we both at the same time said, it's going to be okay. Like, it's going to be okay. And I said, what are you talking about? And he said, the baby. And he said, what are you talking about? And I said, the money. And we knew at that moment that we needed to swap roles. Like I needed to go back to work and he needed to stay home. Mm-hmm. And I think it felt weird. And I think it took some bravery because it meant abandoning the traditional trajectory.
Mm-hmm. That you had been raised with.
Yeah. Like, I should be able to figure this out. Like I should stay home with my baby, bond. I should be loving this. This is what people do. This is what moms do. Mm-hmm. And, he was supposed to work. He was supposed to be a provider. Was it okay for him to quit his job or to not go look for another job? Mm-hmm. But we eventually embraced those opposite roles. Mm-hmm. And I think that helped me come back to myself because I went back to work and I thrived, and he stayed home and focused on making healthy food and meditating and taking care of our child, and he thrived.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And he did that for I don't know how many years.
A few years, and then we in a sense we swapped again, or we worked out a different solution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it feels like to me, just in hearing that you like that was a critical juncture where you were coming up against an edge of like, oh, I don't feel like myself right now. And as it played out, but it was the recognition of like, oh, I'm not thriving right now, even though quote unquote, maybe I should be.
Yes. And that's where the shoulds came in. Maybe that was.
And you found that if actually I'm more myself by working, then I can be a better parent and a better partner.
Yes. I wanted to be sure that my child didn't become more important than me. So reflecting on Kate Chopin's quote, I would have died for my child, but I didn't want to give up my life for my child. I wanted to be a model for her, and that meant demonstrating my own priorities. I wanted to feel alive. I wanted to take care of myself. I wanted to claim some alone time. I wanted to rest. And I wanted her to see me doing those things, as well as taking care of her and being a good mom.
And being an entrepreneur.
Yes, absolutely. Running my own business, reinventing myself. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I haven't talked a lot about work, but work was a big part of that journey. Mm-hmm. Is that good? Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and in fact, I think I'll go into that and what I've known you, I guess now since your daughter was probably around 8, and just this recognition of, for you, being an entrepreneur did allow you and a writer to create a schedule that worked for you to be able to provide. And also, I know that you still take her to school in the mornings and you participate in all of her after school activities. So there is some flexibility that you created a life that you can let work help. You created a life where work is something that you can thrive in, and you're also able to be there for your daughter at the moments that count and are important to you.
Absolutely.
What about your support network?
To do all that, I had a good one. I was fortunate to have a husband who had the same parenting values that I did. He did the dishes and embraces masculine and feminine roles. And my boyfriend also helped me rediscover myself when I was starting to feel a little lost. My daughter was 6 or 7, and I was like, losing myself, just a mom, It's easy to fall into unsexiness during those early parenthood years. And I think both my boyfriend and my husband helped me make sure that I still felt like a woman, not just a mom.
And what I want to call out there is that they created an environment where you were able to feel that for yourself, that you were able to feel sexy again.
Exactly. Yeah, that's correct.
Mm-hmm. I don't have any children. And I know another good friend of yours is also childless. How does this play a part in you remaining or embracing yourself?
I've always had some friends that didn't have children, and along with some friends that did. And it just happened that way, I guess. It wasn't a conscious decision, but I think I'm attracted to the energy of both moms and non-moms. I enjoy talking about my child, and I also like to make sure I'm staying interested in other things, right? Mm-hmm. And that definitely helped me keep coming back to myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's funny. I have not thought about that, but yes, when I think about all of our conversations, I have a strong relationship with your daughter. I know how strong your relationship is with her. She feels very present to you and everything you're doing. And yet we very rarely talk about her. That's not the dominant conversation. It's just like, here's a highlight, real if necessary.
Absolutely. And when I talk to Amanda, I'm typically not talking about my daughter, and that's okay. Like, I have plenty of conversations about my daughter with my husband and with my friend Jessica, who also has a daughter, with my mom. And that's fine. Like, it's okay to have conversations that don't involve puberty and lunchboxes and extracurricular activities and piano lessons. So I think that's really worked out well for me.
You mentioned earlier that you said your daughter helped you embrace the present moment.
Yeah. I feel like in a sense, my child really did become my guru, in that she would say to me sometimes when I was getting anxious, she would say, "Come on, Mom, let's unstress." You know, that was like at age 6, right? And there was a moment in the kitchen when I was explaining to her, it was right before Christmas, and due to some schedule snafu, she was going to miss this St. Nicholas experience at her school. And I was explaining it to her, and I was saying, "I'm sorry that you're not going to get to go." I was kind of going on about it, as I do. And she just looked at me, she's coloring her mandala in this little blue cupcake sweater. And she's like, "Mom, we're missing the song." And it's like Landslides playing, by Fleetwood Mac. And she wanted a song that she loved. And she's just like, "No, what are you doing? Like, let's just be right here in the moment."
Right. Like, she had already moved past the fact that she was missing something, and she was back to like, "I'm coloring and listening to music, and you're
messing it up." And to be honest, she doesn't run as anxious as I do. So she's always teaching me to relax and come back to the present moment. And it's so awesome. And it's so super annoying. Because I'm just like, "No, this has to be done. You're forgetting this. Oh my God, what if this happens?" She's like, "Whatever, I don't care." And it's really helpful. It really does. I mean, I say annoying just because I want her to be anxious about it, but she doesn't need to be. She's pretty good at that. She's anxious about the things that matter. Just like my husband. I have to give him credit for that. So I'm really grateful for her for bringing me back to the present moment.
Beautiful. Yeah. And I'm grateful. I'm just going to say shout out to her and her being in my life as well. She and I have shared some really sweet moments, and I could look forward to more. And and that time in Costa Rica when I was visiting you with your family, and I still remember swimming in the pool together. And it's just, as a childless person, I've always had friends with friends who've had children and have had relationships with the kids as well that have been really important to me. And so that maybe that's a reason for the blend as well, that we also are a fit, which is that, I'm just always amazed at the little people, like the kids in the world who are just so smart and wise and creative and kind.
Yeah. And I'm so grateful for your relationship with her. This is something I never imagined I would do before I had kids, to create a strong bond for her with another trusted female adult. And this is something my friend Dawn told me early on. She said, she may not be comfortable coming to you at some point about a difficult topic. And so it's nice for her to have these women around. My good friend Jessica, she has a certain bond with her. She saw Dawn a lot at school, and she spent a lot of time with you. And I feel good that she knows that she could come to you. And of course, I have a great relationship with her. And at first when Dawn told me this, I was like, no. I was super defensive and not on board at all. Because I was like, no, she should come to me. And eventually I got used to this concept and was like, okay, yeah, I get it.
Right. And now I say to her, when I'm with your daughter, I'm like, okay, what of this do you want me to tell your mom? And what of this should you tell your mom? And so that we're on the same page so that she can feel and trust of that.
So beautiful.
But I will say, and you're calling out a role that I feel very made for and have been, which is just the badass aunt.
Totally.
And I have nieces and nephews, chosen nieces and nephews, and biological nieces and nephews all around, and feel really blessed. But I was also that I had an aunt who I could always rely on, as well as my mom's best friend was the woman that I was able to tell the stuff that there was no way I was telling my mom. And so I guess I'm just living out the role that was really provided to me.
Yeah, that's great. That's beautiful. And you do a really great job of it. And when growing up, I also had, my mom and I were very good friends. And so I felt really comfortable going to her. I did have a cousin. I remember talking to my cousin about birth control and vibrators. That was the okay, I need to know more about this. Can you please fill me in? Right. But yeah, I didn't have as much of that. So I'm glad to provide her with that. And I mentioned that to her. It's you can always talk to Janelle if you have a question. So that feels good. A little resource. There's many things I've read in addition to Kate Chopin's The Awakening. And I know you also know this book and Mara Lindbergh's Gift from the Sea, that also talks a little bit about staying yourself as a mom and balancing the roles of wife, mother, and woman.
Okay, it's time for the Braveheart homework. Do you have any, Andrea?
I'd say if you're a mom, think about a passion that may have gone dormant since you've had children, or consider taking some alone time, more than an hour. If you can get it into an hour, great, but get an hour or two where you are separate from your family, in a different environment, not in your house. It doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be extravagant. Go to a coffee shop for 2 hours on your own. I had a friend, Keely, that I haven't spoken to in years, but she's just a hoot of a girl. And she said growing up, her mom went to a movie every single Saturday. Her mom took care of everything during the week. And on Saturday morning, her mom would go to a movie and she'd stay home with her dad. That's a lot of consistency. And I probably wouldn't do it that way, but however you want to do it. If you can get it once a month, great. If you can get it every week, great. But it is important to get that time and just get curious about that. No pressure. Just think about it.
And I'm guessing too that although you mentioned it for moms, if we have any dads listening, it's a good role. It's a good tip just for a parent. Yeah,
absolutely. For any parent. It's how can you stay yourself?
And how can you carve out a little bit of alone time?
Yeah. We honor all the moms out there and dads and parents and Bravehearts. If you have any questions about parenting and poly and would like some one-on-one coaching, feel free to reach out. If you also want to ask a question to be featured on an episode, we'd love to have you. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Do you need permission to be human? You got it. Listen, subscribe, and review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Learn more about us at permissiontobehuman.live.